It was summer of 2007. I was 16 at the time, and I had a bad habit of crawling out of my bedroom window and going for long walks in the middle of the night. I was pretty fearless by nature, but that summer even I was getting nervous. There was a story going around of a guy in my neighborhood who was attacking young women. The tale went that he would find them on a bus or at a bus stop, follow them until they were alone, and then sexually assault them. I thought it was just a rumor that persisted all summer and seemed to grow more elaborate and wild rather than fading with time. On the second day of school, rumor became fact. The police liaison for our high school held an assembly for all the female students. She told us that there was a man who was targeting young women, particularly petite girls, and that while no one had been raped, a few had been assaulted but managed to get away. She told us to be safe and to never walk alone, especially at night. I didn't listen. Like an irresponsible teenager, I continued with my late night adventures like I was invincible. At the time, my then best friend was dating a guy who really creeped me out. At the time, I was casually dating a less than stellar guy myself, so I really felt like I couldn't judge. But this guy was something else. Every time I had ever encountered or spoken with him, my internal radar went off. He seemed like an average, laid-back kind of guy, maybe a little unmotivated, but an okay person. At the time, I couldn't figure out what it was that raised red flags for me, but I suspect it was his body language. That subtle communication that can give away so much. My friend and I had been growing slowly apart through high school. When she invited me for a sleepover just after Halloween, I thought it would be fun. When I arrived, I was suddenly doubtful. When I accepted the invitation, I didn't know that her boyfriend had moved temporarily into her house. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs. Boyfriend was staying in the room beside my best friend's. I thought it was a weird situation, and I didn't really want to hang around him, but I loved my friend, so I stayed. Throughout the evening, the boyfriend would make little comments here and there, just inappropriate enough for me to shoot him a dirty look, but not bad enough for me to risk rocking the boat by calling him out on it. Finally, my friend put her foot down when, as her boyfriend was carrying the TV into her room so we could watch a VHS, he suggested, jokingly, that we could have a threesome. My friend kicked him out of her room and told him to stop being gross. I was suddenly on edge. I didn't like the way he was looking at me as he left. I was so lost in my own thoughts I hardly remembered the movie. The movie ended around midnight and my friend fell asleep before it was over. I turned off the television and flopped onto the mattress, but I couldn't sleep. A very strange thought was forming in my head. The guy stalking and assaulting women. His physical description matched her boyfriend's. Stalker guy's MO was to go after small young women. Both my friend and I were short and slim. I knew that her boyfriend had been in my neighborhood around the time of the attacks. I had seen him at a bus stop once on one of my midnight walks. I told myself that I was just being paranoid, and yet I couldn't drop the idea. After about an hour of lying in the dark, I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard the door slowly begin to open. The room was set up with 2 mattresses on the floor, my friend on the one closest to the window, mine so near to the door that if I reached out my leg, I could close it. The door only opened a crack before I reacted. On instinct, I stretched out my leg and pushed against the door, quickly shutting it. My heart was beating so fast as my brain whirred through the scenario. Was it a burglar? No, I hadn't heard anyone coming up the stairs. It had to be the boyfriend. I waited quietly for a moment to see if her boyfriend would say anything, or knock. Maybe he wanted the television back? He didn't say anything, just tried the door again and again. I scooched further down the mattress to put both of my feet against the door. It was as if he couldn't quite decide what he wanted to do. He would try the door once or twice, walk quietly back to his room, wait a minute, then come back to try the door again. The door had no lock, so if I didn't keep my legs against the door, he could open it easily. I wasn't sure what to do, so I just kept doing what I was doing. Finally, after about 30 minutes of silently trying the door, he went back to his room. I didn't hear anything else after, so I think he fell asleep. For obvious reasons, I didn't sleep that night. I just kept my feet against the door and tried to figure out what I would say to my friend. I had somewhere to be early the next morning, and my ride came at 6. So when I snuck out, my friend was still fast asleep. I left a note for her to call me ASAP. Later in the day, I called the police non-emergency line and spoke to an officer. I told her that I didn't have a lot to go on, mostly intuition, but that I had a tip about the guy assaulting women in my neighborhood. The officer thanked me for the tip and reminded me to stay safe. For once, I listened. I didn't go on any nighttime walks for the next little while. Soon after, and before I got a chance to talk to my friend again, her boyfriend was arrested. He had been the one after all, the guy sexually assaulting women. I guess the police were already suspicious of him, so when his DNA was matched to the last assault scene, he was caught. It was a terrible thing to go through, but my friend was really brave, and she even worked with the police to get justice for the victims. The boyfriend pleaded guilty to 6 counts of sexual assault and 3 counts of sexual assault causing bodily harm in 2009. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison and to be listed on the sex offender registry for 20 years. I was 10 years old and had just started 5th grade. I had recently made a new friend in school named Nikki. My parents allowed me to go for a sleepover at her house. They had met her mom once, and my mom and dad were pretty laid back because I was their last kid. I had 2 older sisters that were 9 to 13 years older than me. So my mom dropped me off, said hello to Nikki's mom, and then left. Nikki and I started playing karaoke when her mom decided she was going to leave. Nikki and I were left to do whatever we wanted for the next 5 hours. Nikki's older sister came home around 1 a.m. and told us that we should go to bed because we were falling asleep on the couch. So we went into Nikki's room and laid in her bed. Later that night, I can't be sure what time it was because it was pitch dark, Nikki's mom came home. I woke up to a pounding sound on Nikki's bedroom door. I started yelling in fear when I felt a hand over my mouth. It was Nikki telling me to be quiet and pretend to be asleep, but at that moment, it was too late. Her mom had kicked the door open, stormed over to the bed, and grabbed Nikki's face. She began screaming at Nikki because we accidentally left the TV on. I was trying to hide under the covers, but she saw me. She began slamming her fists on the bed around me and screamed, "You think you are better than me?" I was sobbing, and all I could think about was going home. I was so scared, and I begged her mom to let me call my parents because I felt sick. Her mom grabbed my chin, looked me in the eyes, and said, "I know what you're doing, little girl, and you aren't going anywhere until I say you can." She then stormed out of the room, slamming the half-broken bedroom door behind her. Nikki said nothing, and neither did I. Needless to say, I did not sleep that night. In the morning when I went to call my mom, Nikki's mom was on the phone. She wouldn't let me use it, even though I asked multiple times. Finally, she was going to take a shower, and I heard her pass the phone off to Nikki's sister and said, "Don't let that little bitch use this phone. If you do, I ain't buying you cigarettes anymore." I was a sheltered kid at the time, but when I overheard that, I knew I had to get out of there. I approached Nikki's sister and she basically threw the phone at me. She was ready to give it to me before I asked for it. With a look of fear in her eyes, she said, "My mom is calling her guy, so you need to call your home, now." And so I did. She saved my life, and I still believe that to this day. Was her guy someone who was going to get rid of me? I shudder at the thought. My mom then picked me up, and I acted like nothing was wrong. 2 days later, it was Parents' Day in school. Nikki was in my class, which meant her mom was there too. Her mom approached me and asked me why I never wanted to come over anymore and accused me of being a mean girl. She talked to me in a way that seemed harmless, therefore it wasn't obvious to my mom or to my teacher. I kept my mouth shut and didn't say a word. Well, until 2 weeks later. My older sister was babysitting me while our parents were at the movies, and I broke down and told her what happened because I couldn't stop thinking about it. She comforted me and told my parents. We hugged each other and we cried. A couple of weeks later, Nikki stopped coming to school. My classmates wondered what happened, and so did I. I didn't want to ask my parents what had happened. 15 years later, I heard from Nikki on Facebook. There was no life-changing conversation, but we exchanged pleasantries. I guess that's life sometimes.